I'll start with a question to Capriati, because you made what I think is a very important point about the way in which European meanings of certain terms have entered Indian languages, and how one gets the meaning of religion. Now, the question I want to raise is to what extent these meanings of the European language words were accessible to Indians. Because you see, if you take these terms, religion, worship, priests, these are all embedded in a background framework, which is basically Christian theology in the European languages. And over 15 centuries or more, that framework has shaped our language use, the way we talk about religion, the way we talk about worship, the meanings we attribute to these terms. And of course, you cannot just lift a term out of the framework and give it some separate definition. I mean, the terms derive their meaning from their relation to other sets of concepts, which are also part of the Christian theological framework. But Indians who adopted some of these terms and tried to translate them into Hindi or Kannada or any other language, Indian language, didn't have access to that framework. I mean, how could they then understand what religion is, what priest means, what worship means? And didn't they distort the meaning and give a completely different meaning, which takes both connotations of the Western terms and connotations of the Indian?
The discussion is about the Western educated elites, and that's where you first find, I think, the change in meaning. And the quotation from the Bengali was about he was living in a Western educated environment. It's basically this dialogue and discussion and overt reaction to Christianity, organised reaction to Christianity, was among the Western educated elites in the cities, developing cities during the 19th century.
When someone speaks in the name of religion, they're speaking according to what he calls mondial latinization, or global Latinization. Which, in other words, when you speak the language of religion, you are automatically translated into an Anglo-American Latinized framework. And that's precisely what I'm suggesting is following Balu's work, that if we use this notion in the history of Indian civilization, I think we are being led down blind alleyways to an extent, because I don't think the category works very well in those contexts. In particular, the way in which, as Tim Fitzgerald highlighted in his talk, the way in which the modern notion of religion is basically defined in opposition to the construction of something called the secular. And I don't think in the context and the texts and the traditions that I work on in terms of Indian history, that this distinction, modern distinction between the religious and the secular, makes any sense at all. It just distorts what you're looking at.
I thought the question was that this sort of process of abstraction and unification that is supposed to come from the influence of missions or the pervasive influence of the Anglo-Protestant embassy through the colonial encounter is supposed to come through certain concepts and categories. And I thought Jakob's question was, those concepts and categories are embedded in the embassy, and they're supposed to have an effect on what is presumably a quite different embassy or a framework, whether it's an embassy or not, which is very different. And so if it was even so much as apprehended, those concepts and categories, they must have had completely different meanings or measurably different meanings, substantially different meanings. And if that is right, the assumption that there was this sort of creedalization and textualization and all the other effects that both of you have mentioned is put into question, because the categories are not commensurate in the giving and the taking, if Jakob is right. And then Jakob followed up with a point about sort of the methodology of assessing the data of this, which is that if people respond to questions in a way that seems to suggest that the effects that both of you have been talking about have been created, those may just be performatives. Take the microphone away from my face, is what they're really saying.